The Galactic Council chamber was filled with laughter, the kind that cut through the air like a blade. Thousands of alien delegates sat in their tall chairs, looking down at the central display where the image of Earth's silent star system hung like a forgotten relic. No signals, no fleets, no voice from humanity had been heard for years, and to them that was proof enough that Earth had become weak. One alien with silver skin leaned forward and spoke into the hall's echoing chamber. "Look at them, a dead world orbiting a yellow star. Their fire has burned out." His words were followed by more laughter, the kind that hides arrogance beneath polished teeth. High above the chamber, the Speaker of the Council raised a hand. "The humans were loud once," he said slowly, his voice deep and powerful. "They shouted across the stars with their war fleets, their colonies, their weapons, and their pride. And now, nothing, silence." He tilted his head, a sharp smile forming. "Silence is the sound of defeat." The hall erupted again. Delegates from hundreds of star systems pounded the long tables. For them, humanity was nothing but an old story. A warning that even the strong eventually fade away. But far away, beyond their bright worlds and crowded trade routes, the Sol system slept under the dark. Or at least, that's what the galaxy thought. The space around Earth was calm, quiet like the surface of a frozen lake. There were no open transmissions, no trade routes, no visible fleets. It was as if the humans had given up. But deep beneath, the blue oceans, inside black bunkers buried under mountains, something moved. In a steel corridor, hidden far below Earth's surface, a single green light flickered to life. It was small, almost harmless, but it was the first spark after years of silence. In the control room, old screens lit up one by one, revealing the faces of silent operators. No one cheered. No one spoke loudly. They had been waiting for this day for a very long time. A tall woman in a dark uniform stood in the center of the room, her hands behind her back. "Is it confirmed?" she asked quietly. A younger officer swallowed hard, then nodded. "Yes, Commander. They're laughing at us again." She didn't smile. She only turned to the giant black screen at the front, where the live broadcast of the Galactic Council echoed through the static. "They always laugh before they bleed," she whispered. In the council chamber, a young alien delegate raised his voice. "Why not claim their world now?" he said, puffing his chest. "Earth is weak. If we want it, we can take it without firing a single shot." Others nodded in agreement. The idea of invading Earth without resistance seemed too easy, too perfect. The speaker tapped his claws on the table and narrowed his eyes. "Yes," he said, "we'll send an expeditionary force. A small one will do. No need to waste real fleets on the ghosts of humans." The room echoed with cruel joy, but deep. In the dark, far beneath the surface, that single green light was joined by another, then hundreds. Massive doors that had been sealed for decades unlocked with slow metallic groans. Ancient war machines that had slept in silence began to awaken. Long tunnels lit up as footsteps echoed through them. Soldiers in black armor moved like shadows, their faces calm, their eyes sharp. There were no speeches, no music, no banners, only silence. Cold, patient silence. Inside the command chamber, the tall woman leaned forward. "Send the signal," she said. One operator pressed a single button. A transmission shot through the void, cutting through the council's chatter. It was short, only 2 words, but every receiver in the galaxy caught it, every starship, every intelligence agency, every listening post. "We're coming." The Galactic Council chamber fell silent. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Delegates looked at each other with confusion. "Who sent that?" one of them asked. "Is this some kind of joke?" The speaker frowned, his claws digging into the wood of his chair. "Trace it," he snapped. Technicians rushed to their panels. Moments later, one of them raised his head, pale. It came from Sol," he said. "From Earth." The chamber, which had been loud moments ago, was now silent enough to hear the soft hum of the air systems. The silver-skinned alien who had mocked Earth earlier swallowed hard. "Impossible," he whispered. "That planet is dead." In orbit above Earth, deep in the darkness of space, giant doors opened like the jaws of a sleeping beast. From the black hangars, shapes began to move. At first they looked like shadows, but then engines ignited, and the shadows became warships, old massive deadly warships. They rose without a sound, cloaked from every sensor the galaxy had. Above the dark side of the moon, entire squadrons assembled like wolves waiting in the night. Humanity's Armada had been waiting in silence, growing stronger while the galaxy mocked them. Back in the council chamber, the speaker forced a laugh. "A signal is not a war," he said, trying to sound calm, but his voice trembled at the edges. "They have no fleets left. They have nothing." But his words convinced no one. Not even himself. Old stories began to surface in the minds of the alien leaders. Stories of human fleets that once burned pirate worlds in a single night. Stories of soldiers who never surrendered. Stories of a species that turned silence into strategy. The young alien delegate who had shouted for invasion now sat back, his hands cold. "What if they were never gone?" he whispered to no one in particular. The silver-skinned alien looked at him, eyes wide. "Then we've made the worst mistake of our lives." Under the deep oceans of Earth, the commander watched the green light spread across the massive war map. She raised her hand slowly, her voice steady and cold. "For years they laughed at us," she said. "Let's remind them why they should have stayed afraid." The war map flickered with red lines, stretching into the galaxy. Old routes. Old targets, old enemies. Humanity hadn't been defeated. Humanity had been patient. Above the planet, the first wave of warships disappeared into the black void. No announcement, no warning, only silence. And this time, the silence did not mean weakness. It meant war. The galaxy had mocked Earth's quiet for too long, and now the quiet had turned into something they had forgotten how to fear. A storm. A human storm, waiting just beyond their stars, ready to shake the galaxy. The Speaker of the Council leaned forward, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "We might have woken a sleeping god," he said, but by then it was already too late. The humans were moving, and silence was their loudest scream in the dark space between stars, where light moved slowly and shadows lived forever. Something old was waking up. On the far side of the solar system, hidden behind ice and silence, a massive structure began to hum softly. It had been quiet for years, buried in darkness, built to be invisible. Now the sleeping machine was alive again. Across the hidden bases of the Sol system, alarms did not ring. They whispered. They whispered in green lights and silent codes, the language of war spoken without words. Beneath the frozen surface of Europa, under miles of ice, a command center came online. Thick metal doors groaned as they opened for the first time in decades. Engineers moved quickly through narrow hallways, boots echoing against steel floors. They didn't cheer. They didn't panic. This was not new for them. They had been training for this day since the silence began. A young technician ran to a terminal, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Admiral, the Council made their move," he said. "Expeditionary forces are forming." The Admiral, a broad-shouldered man with grey at his temples, looked at the glowing display. Thousands of red icons blinked across the star map. "Good," he said softly. "Let them come." On the other side of the system, inside a black asteroid base, ships were being unchained from their long sleep. Massive dreadnoughts rose from their hidden docks, like giants stepping into the night. Smaller escort ships floated beside them, silent and ready. Engineers checked systems that hadn't failed in decades. Every circuit, every engine, every weapon had been built for one purpose: this moment. A mechanic wiped the frost off the side of a warship and smiled. "It still smells like war," he whispered. His partner, tightening a bolt, grinned. Yeah, feels like home. Inside the command room of the largest hidden base, a massive holographic map filled the air. It showed the galaxy, bright and proud, except for one corner, the Sol system, cold, dark, and silent. The Admiral stepped closer to the glowing sphere that represented Earth. For years they mocked us, he said. His voice was calm but carried weight. They believed silence meant fear. They forgot who taught them how to fight. Around him, officers stood like stone. They had waited too long for this day to let emotion control them. Activate the old networks, he ordered. Far across the system, deep in a hidden trench beneath Mars, communication arrays the size of cities came to life. Thousands of antennas rotated in perfect harmony, and a flood of encrypted signals spread through space. Not open transmissions, not threats. Silent instructions moving faster than light, waking every ship, every pilot, every sleeper unit that had waited in darkness. In a long hallway lit only by red lights, soldiers walked in silence. They wore black armor, polished like obsidian. Their boots moved in rhythm, no music, no words. A young soldier glanced at the man beside him. "Do you think they really forgot us?" he asked in a low voice. The older soldier gave a small laugh. "They didn't forget," he said. "They convinced themselves they didn't need to remember. That's worse. Back in the Council's territory, fleets of alien ships began to assemble. Their commanders sat in warm, bright war rooms, certain of their easy victory. "We're sending only a third of our forces," one alien general said, leaning back in his chair. "The humans have nothing left," another delegate laughed. "A child's fleet will be enough." They toasted their coming victory while Earth's shadow moved in silence. In orbit around a dark asteroid, Captain Mira stood on the bridge of a stealth cruiser. She stared at the shipyard below. One by one, warships ignited their engines. The sight was quiet and beautiful, thousands of ships rising without a single alarm. She placed her hand on the cold glass. "All those years of silence," she said softly. Her second officer, a sharp-eyed woman, nodded. "They never understood silence was our weapon," Mira smiled. "And now they'll hear it." A coded signal pulsed through the fleet. No words, just a sound, low, deep, like the heartbeat of a giant. It was the signal every hidden fleet had trained to follow. Ships broke formation and formed into lines. Dreadnoughts led. Cruisers followed. Carriers moved behind them like dark mountains. It was not an army of the weak. It was a storm that had been waiting under their noses. The Admiral's voice cut through the command channel. Phase 1 initiated. Deep inside an alien base, at the edge of human space, an early warning station picked up a faint reading. "What is that?" one alien operator asked. The scanner showed only a ripple in space, like a breath. "Probably nothing," his partner replied. But then the readings grew stronger. "Wait," the first one whispered. "That's too many ships." Panic filled the room. "Alert the fleet!" But it was too late. The humans had already moved. Inside the hidden base beneath the moon, the Admiral stood on the command platform. "This is no longer a drill," he said. "They will come thinking we are weak. Make sure they leave knowing they were wrong." The room filled with silent nods. Pilots climbed into fighters, crews strapped themselves into battleships, and old AIs that had been sleeping in cold servers whispered awake. Mira's ship joined the formation as the human armada aligned its vectors. Engines roared softly through the void, invisible to the outside world. One young pilot's voice broke through the comms, light but steady. "I was a kid when the galaxy laughed at us," he said. "Today, I want to see their faces when we arrive." Mira's lips curved into a sharp smile. "Then let's give them something to remember." Back in the council chamber, messages flooded in. Fleets reporting strange signals, listening posts going dark, patrol ships vanishing. "What is happening out there?" one alien shouted. The speaker leaned forward, claws digging into the table. "Something we should have feared," he muttered. In the darkness of deep space, the human armada hovered in perfect silence. They didn't announce their presence. They didn't send threats. They simply waited for the enemy to walk into their trap. The Admiral turned to his communications officer. "Open the black gate," he said. With a low metallic sound, space itself began to split. Warp engines screamed silently, bending the stars. One by one, the human warships vanished into the black corridor between stars. The Council fleets had expected weakness. They had prepared for a ghost. What they would face was something else entirely, a predator that had learned to hunt in silence. As the last Dreadnought disappeared into the warp, the Admiral whispered to himself, "This time, they'll learn what silence really means." And in the darkness, the storm kept moving, slow, patient, unstoppable. Ready to shake the stars, the Galactic Council fleet moved through the void with confidence, their engines burning bright like spears in the dark. Thousands of alien soldiers laughed inside their command ships, still mocking the idea that Earth could pose any real threat. Their generals sat around glowing strategy tables, relaxed and proud. "We will reach the Sol system in 6 cycles," one alien commander said with a grin. "By then, this so-called human silence will finally end. We will own their world." His officers nodded. No one questioned him. They believed this war would be a parade, a show of power against a broken race. But far away, hidden in the black between stars, the human fleet was already there, waiting like a hunter in tall grass. No bright engines, no banners, no songs. Just cold, silent warships with black hulls that swallowed light. Their positions were perfect, their traps set long before the Council's fleet had even left their territory. On the flagship's bridge, Admiral Vale stood with his hands behind his back, eyes fixed on the holographic display showing red dots moving closer. "They think they're marching to a dead world," he said softly. Captain Mira stood beside him. "Let them keep thinking," she replied. "They won't understand until it's too late." Vale gave a thin smile. "That's the point." The fleet's tactical AI spoke in a low, calm tone. "Enemy forces entering intercept zone in 4 minutes. The bridge fell silent. The sound of breathing and the soft hum of systems were all that filled the air. Soldiers stared at the screen. They weren't nervous. They were ready. They had trained for years for this moment. The silence wasn't emptiness. It was precision. It was power. In the enemy fleet, one scout ship at the front suddenly detected something strange. The young alien officer on the sensor deck frowned at the readings. "Commander, I'm picking up distortions," he said. The commander turned lazily in his chair, probably sensor static. "Humans have nothing left." But then the readings grew sharper. "No," the officer whispered, "this isn't static." His voice cut off as the screen went dark. The scout ship vanished without a sound. On the Council flagship, alarms started flashing. "We lost contact with Scout 17, one of the bridge officers shouted. The commander stood up. "What do you mean lost contact?" "It's just gone," the officer answered, hands shaking. Another scout disappeared, then another, then 3 more. Red marks blinked out on their map one after another like dying stars. Panic spread through the bridge. "Who is out there?" Someone shouted. In the shadows of space, Mira's cruiser moved first. Engines whispered as her ship drifted like a ghost behind the enemy line. "Targets locked," her weapons officer said in a low voice. Mira didn't shout. She just gave a small nod. "Begin." In an instant, the darkness exploded. Silent torpedoes left their launchers and cut through the void like invisible blades. They struck the lead formation of the alien fleet before anyone could react. No warning, no build-up. 1 second the ships were there, and the next they were burning. On the Council flagship, chaos erupted. "We're under attack!" Officers screamed. "From where?" "From where?" The alien commander stared at the screens as more ships vanished from his fleet. "This isn't possible," he whispered. They were supposed to be weak, but the galaxy had forgotten what human silence meant. It was not the silence of surrender. It was the silence before a strike. Admiral Vale watched from the flagship of the human fleet. "Their formation is breaking," an officer reported. Vale's voice was calm. "Good. We'll cut them apart before they even realize how many of us there are." Another officer looked up, her hands steady on the controls. "Phase 2? Vale nodded. "Phase 2. Across the hidden formation, human dreadnoughts powered up their main weapons. For a heartbeat, space itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, like the roar of a star waking from a long sleep, the beams erupted. Entire sections of the alien fleet melted in seconds. Ships that had once mocked humanity burned like paper. Alien soldiers screamed through broken channels, unable to see their enemy. In the confusion, the alien commander barked orders. "Reform the line! Engage all weapons!" But his fleet was already scattered, their formations destroyed before they could react. Dozens of ships turned their guns toward the black space ahead, firing blindly into the dark. Their beams cut through empty space. Nothing hit. The humans were never where they expected them to be. Inside Mira's cruiser, the crew moved like a single machine. "Enemy firing pattern detected," her tactical officer said. "Predictable," Mira whispered. She turned to her pilot. "Let's finish the second line." Her ship spun gracefully through the void, dodging incoming fire with impossible precision. "Torpedoes away!" the weapons officer called out. Another wave of explosions tore through the alien fleet. On the Council flagship, the commander finally saw them. Out of the darkness, the human dreadnoughts emerged one by one. Their black hulls gleamed like monsters from a nightmare. They didn't carry flags. They didn't announce their names. They didn't need to. Every alien in that fleet understood what they were looking at. "It can't be," the commander breathed. "They built an armada." The humans didn't answer. Their ships didn't need to speak. The silence was the answer. The trap had been planned for years. Every inch of this battle space was chosen, mapped, prepared. The galaxy thought Earth had fallen asleep. But Earth had been sharpening its knives in the dark. Admiral Vale raised his hand. "Final wave," he ordered. The human fleet closed in like a tightening fist. Massive carriers released swarms of fighters, dark wings filling the void. Alien ships tried to retreat, but escape routes were already blocked. "We're surrounded," one alien captain cried. The commander of the Council fleet slammed his fist on the table. How? How did they do this? In the heat of the battle, Mira's voice came through the human fleet's open channel. "For years they laughed at our silence," she said. "Now let them hear what silence sounds like when it kills." The human fleet answered not with words, but with fire. Beams and torpedoes rained down on the remaining alien ships. One by one, the proud Council warships fell. On the Council flagship, smoke filled the bridge. Systems failed one after another. "Commander, we're losing everything," an officer shouted. The commander looked at the burning wreckage of his fleet and felt the cold weight of fear for the first time. "We underestimated them," he said softly. "We thought silence was weakness." On the human flagship, Vale watched the last enemy cruiser explode in silence. "Enemy fleet neutralized," a voice reported. Vale closed his eyes. "Send the message," he said. His communications officer nodded and pressed a button. Across the galaxy, every listening station, every council world, every leader heard the same two words that had started this storm. "We're here." In the council chamber, the Speaker of the Galaxy stared at the report with shaking hands. Entire fleets gone, thousands of ships destroyed, not one human ship lost. Whispers filled the room, no longer mocking, no longer laughing. Fear was spreading. For years they had believed Earth was dead. But Earth had only been silent, waiting for the right moment to strike. The storm had begun. And it was just the beginning. The battlefield floated in silence after the first strike. Burned hulls of alien ships drifted like broken bones through the void. The human fleet held position, calm and cold, engines humming softly in the darkness. Inside the Galactic Council, news of the defeat arrived like a storm. Holograms of panicked generals filled the chamber, their voices sharp and shaking. "Entire fleets gone in minutes," one shouted. "Our scouts reported no survivors," another added. The speaker slammed his clawed hand on the table. "This is impossible," he growled. "Earth should have been nothing but ash." No one laughed anymore. The sound of silence spread through the hall, the same silence they once mocked. Now it made their hearts race. In the orbit of a distant council stronghold, new fleets began to gather. Massive carriers, dreadnoughts and cruisers arrived one after another, filling the black with their silver hulls. Generals whispered among themselves, trying to cover their fear with bravado. It was a lucky ambush. one insisted. They caught us off guard, but if they face our full force, they'll break. Another nodded quickly. They've been hiding too long. We have the numbers. They can't win against the entire galaxy. But behind their confident voices, their eyes betrayed doubt. Far away, deep inside the human flagship Eclipse, Admiral Vale stood before a wide observation window. The stars stretched like rivers of fire. His officers stood in silence, waiting for his orders. Captain Mira entered the room, her boots echoing on the steel floor. "They're regrouping," she said. "Council fleets are assembling in Sector 12. They want a full confrontation." Vale didn't turn. "Of course they do," he said softly. "They still believe numbers win wars." Mira crossed her arms. "They don't understand that we've already chosen the battlefield." Vale gave a thin smile. "Exactly. Let them come where we want them." On the alien home fleet, Commander Threx paced across the bridge, his golden armor gleaming. "They caught us by surprise once," he said to his officers. "But this time we'll crush them like insects." A nervous lieutenant glanced at him. "Sir, with respect, the humans destroyed an entire fleet in under 1 hour." Threx spun around, his voice like a whip. "Because they cheated," he snapped. "Ambushes are tricks, not power. We are power." He turned back to the viewport, ignoring the fear in the room. "And I will show them what power truly means." In the dark, silent corridors of the human fleet, soldiers prepared for the next battle. Maintenance crews worked with fast hands, reloading torpedoes and checking rail cannons. Fighter pilots sat quietly in their cockpits, helmets resting on their knees. A young pilot looked at the veteran beside him. "Do you think they'll send everything this time?" he asked. The older pilot didn't hesitate. "They'll throw everything they've got," he said. "That's what scared empires do. They don't know how to fight smart, only loud." The younger pilot smirked. "Good. Then they won't see it coming." Hours later, the Council fleet jumped into Sector 12, a star system filled with floating debris fields and hidden gravity traps. The alien ships spread out in elegant formation, a glittering wall of power. Thousands of ships, more than any fleet humanity had faced in centuries, surrounded the star like a closing fist. On their bridge, Threx raised his voice. "Humans may have their shadows, but shadows cannot survive in light. Let them come." But what Threx didn't know was that they were already there. Inside the debris fields, cloaked dreadnoughts waited like wolves beneath the snow. The human fleet had arrived days earlier and had laid traps across the entire system. Mine sat silently in gravity wells. Jammer drones drifted like pieces of dead metal. Entire hidden squadrons of fighters were already behind the enemy line, their engines quiet and patient. On the Eclipse, Vale watched the red dots on his map form the perfect shape. "They think they're hunting us," he said. Mira leaned closer to the display. "But they're walking right into the cage." The Council fleet moved deeper into the sector, their scanners sweeping the void. At first, nothing appeared. Then faint echoes flickered on their radars. "Contacts," a sensor officer called. "Multiple contacts!" Threx raised his chin. "Fire on all signals," he barked. The alien fleet unleashed a storm of energy beams across the darkness. The beams struck only empty debris. "Where are they?" someone shouted. Before anyone could answer, the first mine detonated. A massive explosion tore through the alien formation, ripping cruisers apart like paper. Then a second blast, then a third. Their beautiful wall of power cracked like glass. The human dreadnoughts uncloaked. One by one, their black hulls appeared behind the enemy lines. No battle cry, no warning, just precision. Torpedoes launched in tight waves. Rail cannons roared like thunder. The alien fleet, proud and confident, suddenly found itself surrounded. "They're everywhere!" a council officer screamed. "They were here all along." On the Eclipse, Vale's voice remained steady. "Cut their center," he ordered. Mira turned to the communications officer. "Signal the wolves." The hidden fighter squadrons burst out of the debris fields like arrows from a bow. They struck the alien carriers from behind, slicing through their shields with surgical strikes. The once mighty formation was now chaos. Threx stared at the burning wreckage on his screens, his voice breaking. "No, this isn't possible." "Admiral," Mira said, "they're trying to pull back." Vale nodded slowly. Let them. Just enough to make them think they can escape. The alien ships turned to retreat, but the moment they tried to open a warp corridor, human jammers activated. The space around them twisted. Their engines failed. They were trapped. Panic filled the Council's command ship. Our jump drives aren't responding, shouted an officer. We can't get out. Threx's hands tightened around the rail. Then we fight to the last ship, he hissed. But even as he said it, he knew. They had already lost. The human fleet advanced with cold precision. Their weapons didn't roar in anger. They whispered in control. Alien ships exploded one after another. Dreadnoughts fell like stones into the star's pull. Fighters cut through escorts like wind through leaves. Every maneuver the Council fleet made had already been predicted, planned for, countered. Inside his command ship, Threx collapsed into his chair as the last line of defense fell. He stared at the massive silhouette of the human flagship on his screen. Its black hull reflected no light, only darkness. A message came through on a narrow band. A woman's voice, Mira's, calm and sharp. You should have listened to the silence, she said. The channel cut off before he could respond. Minutes later, the Council fleet was gone. Not scattered, not retreated. Gone. Only wreckage floated in the void, glowing faintly under the dying light of the star. On the human bridge, the crew didn't cheer. They didn't need to. This was not the end. This was a warning. Vale looked out at the quiet battlefield. They'll come again, he said. Mira nodded. Let them. We're not done either. Back in the Council chamber, leaders stared at the destruction reports in silence. The speaker's voice was a whisper. 2 fleets crushed. By ghosts, no one answered. For the first time in history, the galaxy feared the silence. And Earth's Armada, unseen for decades, had returned like a storm they could not stop. The galaxy was no longer laughing. What once was mockery had now turned into silence, and that silence felt heavier than war drums. Reports of 2 destroyed fleets spread like wildfire through the stars. Whole worlds whispered in fear. Council members who had once laughed at the thought of human power now avoided speaking Earth's name. Entire colonies moved their fleets closer to their borders, not to attack, but to protect themselves from something they no longer understood. Inside the Council chamber, the air was thick. The speaker sat at the head of the long table, claws tapping against the surface. His voice was low but sharp. 2 of our strongest fleets, he said slowly, gone. Not beaten, not scattered, gone. Tell me why humanity is winning this war before it even began. The generals lowered their heads. No one wanted to be the one to speak. One finally rose, voice trembling. We underestimated them. We believed they were silent because they were weak. But silence was their weapon. Across the stars, deep in the black ocean of space, the human armada gathered. Ships that had remained hidden for decades now flew openly. Dreadnoughts formed iron walls in the void, cruisers spread like wings, and fighters filled the black sky like a storm of shadows. Admiral Vale stood on the bridge of the eclipse, hands clasped behind his back. The command room buzzed quietly with movement. Captain Mira entered, holding a small tablet. They're calling for a war summit, she said. The Council wants to gather every allied race. They're building the largest fleet in history. Vale looked at her without blinking. Good, he said softly. The bigger the target, the louder the fall. In the Council's hidden warbase, orbiting a dying star, dozens of alien generals argued around a massive table. We need overwhelming power, one shouted. We must burn Earth to ash before they reach us. Another slammed his fist on the table. You've seen what they can do. They move before we even know they're there. How do you fight an enemy you can't see? The speaker raised his claw, and silence filled the room. We are the galaxy's council, he growled. They are one world, one. We will crush them under the weight of every fleet, every gun, every world we control. No one dared argue. But fear hung in the room like a shadow. Back aboard the Eclipse, the fleet prepared for the largest battle of the war. Deep in the lower decks, soldiers checked their weapons with steady hands. Mechanics wiped sweat from their brows as engines purred like beasts. In the fighter bays, young pilots strapped themselves in, eyes hard, voices quiet. A young pilot looked at his squad leader. They're bringing everyone this time, aren't they? The squad leader nodded slowly. Good, he said. Saves us the trouble of hunting them down one by one. Hours later, a massive fleet emerged from hyperspace. Thousands of council ships filled the dark. Their engines glowed like a sea of fire. Their signal covered the void, proud and loud, like an empire refusing to kneel. This is Commander Threx of the Galactic Council. A voice boomed through open channels. You are surrounded. Your silence ends here. Surrender or your world burns. On the human flagship, Vale listened without changing expression. Mira raised an eyebrow. They like to talk, she said dryly. Vale smiled faintly. Then let them talk. Talking makes them feel safe. Safe people make mistakes. The council fleet moved forward slowly, confident in its numbers. It was the largest force ever assembled. But what they didn't see were the invisible ships already behind them. Hidden in the black void, human stealth fleets surrounded the enemy like shadows circling a fire. The humans had let the enemy bring their full strength to one place, exactly as planned. On the council bridge, Threx narrowed his eyes. Why aren't they responding? He muttered. One of his officers frowned at a console. Sir, there's something strange. The scanners, something's jamming them. Threx leaned forward. What do you mean jamming? The officer's voice cracked. I can't detect their fleet anymore. I can't detect anything. The lights on the bridge dimmed, as if the void itself was swallowing them. In that silence, a single human transmission came through the static. It wasn't loud. It wasn't long. It was Vale's voice, calm and cold. You should have listened when we were quiet. Then the sky caught fire. From every direction, human warships appeared like ghosts pulling off their masks. Torpedoes sliced through the dark before the council fleet could react. Rail cannons roared. Dreadnoughts opened fire with blinding beams of light. Council ships exploded in perfect rhythm, like dominoes falling. Panic filled their channels. We're surrounded, one captain shouted. Where did they come from? Another voice screamed, we can't see them. They're everywhere. On the eclipse, Mira watched the map light up with enemy losses. Their formation's collapsing, she said. Vale gave a quiet nod. Then it's time. He turned to his communications officer. Order the spearhead forward. Split the line. Make them choke on their own numbers. Human dreadnoughts formed a spear and rammed through the center of the massive fleet. Enemy ships tried to close the gap, but precision strikes tore them apart before they could react. Fighters swarmed like hornets, cutting down defenses. Thrax's bridge shook as explosions lit up the screens. No, he shouted. We have the numbers. This can't be happening. A young officer on his bridge whispered, they planned this. All of it. Threx turned, his eyes wide with a fear he could no longer hide. Then the council has already lost, the officer said softly. Back on the eclipse, the human admiral watched in silence as the largest fleet in the galaxy fell apart piece by piece. No mercy? Mira asked quietly. Vale shook his head. No speeches, he said. End it. The fleet responded without hesitation. In minutes, the center of the council fleet was shattered. Carriers burned. Dreadnoughts broke apart. Thousands of ships tried to flee, but their jump gates failed. The humans had jammed everything. Threx fell to his knees on the smoking bridge, staring at the giant black shadow of Vale's flagship moving closer. A message came through one final time. Vale's voice, quiet and sharp. This is what silence sounds like when it speaks. The council fleet was gone. The largest force in galactic history had been crushed in one battle. The galaxy watched in horror as transmissions flooded the networks. Billions of eyes saw the once proud fleets burning in space. The fear that had begun as a whisper now spread like a storm. Back in the council chamber, no one spoke. No one dared. Their greatest power had failed. Their laughter had died long ago. Now even their pride had followed. And in the silence of the void, the human fleet moved forward, not to celebrate, but to finish what it had started. The ruins of the council fleet drifted like ash across the stars. Where there had once been the proud, glowing heart of the galaxy's power, now there was only silence. Wrecked carriers spun slowly, cracked open like eggshells. Broken dreadnoughts bled sparks into the void. No voices came from the once mighty council armada. No orders. No screams, nothing. Humanity had not just won a battle, they had erased a symbol. And the entire galaxy had watched it happen live. On thousands of worlds, alien civilians stared at their glowing screens in disbelief. The strongest fleet in history shattered in one night. Some refused to believe it. Others whispered words that had not been spoken in generations, words of fear. Mothers pulled their children closer. Soldiers gripped their weapons a little tighter. Leaders locked their doors. Every star system suddenly understood something too late. Earth had never been weak. It had only been waiting. Inside the council chamber, the atmosphere was frozen. The speaker sat at the head of the long table, but he was not roaring anymore. His claws were still. His voice cracked as he finally spoke. "The fleets are gone," he said quietly. "Every ship, every commander gone." No one answered. The delegates stared at the floor. Fear filled the air like smoke. "If we cannot stop them," the speaker continued, "then we no longer rule this galaxy." An older delegate with scarred skin stood slowly. "We mocked them," he whispered. "We called their silence weakness. But it was a blade we handed to them ourselves." Others began to murmur, not in anger this time, but in panic. "What do we do?" one asked. "How do you stop something that does not speak?" another whispered. The speaker slammed his hand against the table, trying to hide his fear. "We open negotiations," he said. "We must. If they wanted us all dead, they would have finished it by now." But even as he spoke, the stars outside the council's homeworld began to dim. Massive shadows moved in the darkness, swallowing the light. Human dreadnoughts slid out of the void like silent predators. They did not rush. They did not roar. They simply arrived, calm, inevitable, unstoppable. Entire planetary defense systems began to scream alarms. On the Council's home fleet, commanders scrambled. "Human ships inbound," one shouted. "Thousands of them." "Raise shields," another yelled. "Prepare for war." But no matter how loud their orders were, the shadows outside kept growing. On the bridge of the human flagship Eclipse, Admiral Vale watched the Council homeworld appear on the main screen. It glowed softly in the blackness, protected by dozens of orbital defense rings. He clasped his hands behind his back, his voice steady. "All ships hold position." Captain Mira stepped up beside him. "They're terrified," she said. Vale nodded. "Good. Fear is a better weapon than fire." In the Council's war room, Commander Threx, bruised and broken from the last defeat, stumbled into the chamber. His armor was cracked. His voice was hoarse. "They're here," he said. "They're already here." The speaker glared at him. "You were supposed to stop them," he spat. Threx laughed bitterly. "You can't stop a storm by shouting at it." Outside, human dreadnoughts formed a ring around the planet. No ship moved. No gun fired. They simply watched. The galaxy held its breath. The Council's entire defense grid locked onto the human fleet, ready to unleash everything. But Vale did not give the order to attack. He didn't have to. The power balance had already shifted. Humanity didn't need war to win anymore. They had already taken the galaxy's courage. The Council chamber shook as a single signal cut through every system. It wasn't an attack. It was a transmission. Every planet, every station, every ship heard it at the same time. Vale's voice filled the stars, calm and sharp. "For years you mocked us," he said. "For years you thought silence meant fear. But silence was our shield, our warning. You laughed at us because you forgot what we are." His voice grew colder. "You don't forget anymore." In the Council chamber, the speaker whispered, "They're not even asking for terms." A young delegate trembled. "They don't need to ask." Back on the Eclipse, Mira turned to the Admiral. "They're powering up defense systems," she said. Vale didn't look concerned. "They'll hesitate," he said. "Fear always hesitates." He stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the Council's glowing planet. "And when they hesitate, they surrender." Inside the Council's command center, a storm of panic broke out. "Should we fire?" one general yelled. "If we attack, we die," another hissed. "If we surrender, maybe we live." All of them looked to the speaker. For the first time in his long career, he had no orders. He stared at the endless black ships surrounding their world and felt something unfamiliar, a weight pressing on his chest. "I can't stop them," he whispered. Outside, human ships moved slightly closer. No shots fired, just a slow, controlled advance. It was more terrifying than any explosion. Every alien soldier watching the human fleet felt the same chill crawl down their spine. The silence wasn't just a strategy anymore. It was domination. Threx turned toward the speaker, his voice hard. "We should have feared them long ago." The speaker lowered his head. "We all should have." Vale gave the final command. "Broadcast to all Council fleets." Mira nodded and opened the channel. Vale's voice carried across the stars once more. "This is the last warning. You brought this war to our doorstep. You mocked our silence. You thought humanity had disappeared. Now you know we were only waiting. Stand down or your galaxy burns." For a long, unbearable moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, one by one, the Council defense rings began shutting down. Fleets lowered their shields. Weapons powered off. And finally, the speaker's broken voice echoed through the comms. "We surrender." On the bridge of the eclipse, the crew stood in silence. No one cheered. No one shouted. This was not a victory born from pride. It was the end of a long, cold promise. Mira stepped closer to Vale. "It's over," she said softly. Vale's eyes stayed on the planet. "No," he whispered. "This is where it begins." Across the galaxy, leaders who had once mocked Earth now whispered its name in fear. Armies disarmed. Treaties were rewritten. Entire worlds bent their knees without a single shot fired. Humanity had returned, not as victims, but as rulers of the silent war. And in the quiet that followed, everyone finally understood what Earth's silence had always meant. It wasn't weakness. It was a storm waiting, and now the storm belonged to humanity.